start here with Executive Order 13818. And everyone that remembers this one, this is the one blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. December 20th, 2017. This is one that people love to like speculate on and talk about, and maybe he's doing it here, maybe he's doing it there. But what we know for certain is that on December 20th, 2017, there were 13 people. This is a part of the actual executive order that were listed as targeted. Okay. One of these guys, number 3 on the list, is a guy named Dan Gertler. Then it lists, he's an Israeli citizen, but the place of incident is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So who is Dan Gertler? Well, Dan Gertler is an Israeli billionaire. His grandfather, Moshe Schnitzler, was the founder of the Israel Diamond Exchange in 1947. He was the president of the Israel Diamond Exchange from 1967 to 1993. He served in the Irgun, which is like the terrorist paramilitary group. And I'm only calling them terrorists because they call themselves terrorists in their own rhetoric. They're like, yes, we are terrorists and we engage in terrorism. That's how they described themselves in the 40s. And the Israel Diamond Exchange is the largest diamond exchange in the world. Okay. So here's an article from 2 days after the executive order was signed, December 22nd, reporting on the fact that the U.S. sanctions under Trump had targeted an Israeli mining mogul named Gertler over his Congo deals. So who was Gertler? So Gertler, in the 90s, he became really, really tight with the king's son, the king of the Congo, his son, Kabila. Here they are shaking hands. We had the Panama Papers come out in the mid-2010s, like the 2015, 2016, and the Panama Papers exposed that there was like a $360 million bribe between these guys and just lots of money changing hands. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is this country right here, the DRC. It's the second largest nation in Africa, only by a few acres. Is it the second largest? It's really basically the largest country in Africa. And he comes in there in the 90s and sets up a bunch of really illegal mining operations where he has a bunch of child slaves and human slavery, human trafficking, horrible conditions, the kind of stuff that we saw in the movie like Blood Diamond, even though that took place over here in Sierra Leone. It was so bad that even like the other globalist entities were like investigating him and saying, dude, this is way over the top. You are taking this way too far. The IMF was investigating him, etc. So, let's talk about this article. So Kabila, just to give everyone their bearings, this guy on the left is the guy I just showed you from the picture, Kabila. Him and his father were the rulers of the Congo. I said king, but I meant the president of the Congo for about 25, 30 years, up until 2018. So after these sanctions get imposed, all these stories about Kabila and Gertler come out. And because of that, Kabila decides not to run for office. The election is late 2018, early 2019. That allows for this guy on the right, Felix Tshisekedi. I'm just going to call him Felix, for Felix to run, and he wins. All right. So these guys are rivals. This guy in the middle is Yossi Cohen. So I had Yossi Cohen. I showed you all this board I put together about the Israeli cabinet last week. I actually had Yossi Cohen right here on it. I just had him as like the former Mossad director. He's like best friends with Pompeo. He's Netanyahu's political heir apparent. He's like considered Bibi Netanyahu wants him to be him, like his protege once he leaves politics. And so Cohen at the time is the Mossad director. And this article, so all these stories start coming out in 2021, 2022, the misadventures of Mossad chief Yossi Cohen. This is from April 2nd, 2021. This story right here about the bribe, this is from July 15th, 2021. At the same time, about June of 2021, that's when Bibi Netanyahu is like, all right, man, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to ask you to resign as the Mossad chief, and I'm going to bring in David Barnea. David Barnea is now going to be the Mossad chief, and that allows Yossi Cohen to kind of like step away, like out of the public limelight. And then this one right here, Congo Files, cash was deposited into Dan Gertler's accounts, then millions were transferred to top Israeli figures. So what this guy was doing was he was basically raping and pillaging Africa, the Congo. He was using child slaves to mine cobalt, copper, diamonds. trillions and trillions of dollars of rare earth minerals, materials, diamonds in the Congo. He was then taking that cash and then dispersing it among his fellow Israeli billionaires. So the Israeli oligarchy was literally raping and pillaging and looting Africa in the 1990s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. So once these sanctions get imposed, this story comes out in this is from May 19th, 2022. And this talks about Mossad chief Cohen kicked out of the DRC on a mission that could jeopardize Israel. And so it goes on to tell this story about how in 2019, because remember, Cohen is the Mossad director until 2021. So he's the Mossad director at this time. He makes 3 trips to the DRC. None of these trips he coordinates with the Congo government. He shows up the first time with Gertler. Him and Dan Gertler are together. They show up to Felix's office, the president's office, with a gift in hand. That's how it's described. He shows up with a gift in hand and asks for an impromptu meeting. Just out of consideration, they go ahead and give him the meeting. And he just says, "Hey, man, I want to come in here and I want to speak to Kabila. There's some things about Israeli national security interests that we want to talk about." And immediately, there's some suspicion coming out from Felix's people. He's like, "This is really weird. The head of a foreign intelligence agency is in my country without an invitation, no advance warning. He's showing up with this guy Gertler, who's been sanctioned by the United States for exploiting children and exploiting like slave practices." He then comes back a second time with Gertler, and also has a meeting with Felix, but then also meets with Kabila. At that meeting, the Felix's people, and that meeting occurs on October 10th, 2019. Really weird that on that exact same day, Felix flies out of the exact same airport that Cohen had flown in and flown out of, and there were multiple planes in Felix's entourage that took off. One of them crashes right after taking off, and everyone on board dies. Very, very strange. You then also have during that same meeting during that second trip, you have right down here, it says that after Cohen's second meeting with Felix, and because of his connection to Kabila, the president's staff became suspicious of the Mossad chief's motives. Some of Felix's aides even voiced fears that Cohen was helping Kabila acquire arms for a coup attempt. Okay? So what ends up happening, fast forward, so then he comes back a third time, and like in the next 2 months, comes back a third time, and literally Felix's people, his security team, meets the private plane on the tarmac and is interrogating him in the airport. And they're like, "What are you doing here? You are this is really, really sketchy." And they put him right back on a plane, send him back to Israel. They ban him. He's never allowed to go back to the DRC. And because of that whole situation, it creates kind of this international scandal. People are basically saying the hubris of this guy to think that he can, as the Mossad director, can just show up to a place multiple times without contacting their foreign ministry and letting them know that he's coming. Very, very weird. It's reported in the Israeli media that Bibi Netanyahu had approved the meeting from it was an officially sanctioned meeting or a trip from the Israeli government standpoint. It also comes out in this article that so this guy Gertler, he's sanctioned by Trump. So how did the sanctions get lifted? The sanctions get lifted on January 15th, 2021, 5 days before Trump gets out of office. How does that happen? Well, there's this guy that I already had as part of my board over here. His name is Ron Dermer. So Ron Dermer was born and raised in Miami, Florida. He's a South Florida boy just like you. He's an American citizen, but he's also an Israeli citizen with dual citizenship. He kind of served as Bibi Netanyahu's Dan Scavino. He was his right-hand man, his kind of gopher. And then because of that, during the Trump administration, Ron Dermer was appointed as the Israeli ambassador to the United States. And so he then uses, according to this article right here, he puts pressure on the Trump administration, especially Steve Mnuchin, to suspend the sanctions imposed on Gertler 5 days before the end of the Trump presidency. That actually happened. The sanctions were suspended. It then gets reported finally by the news in late February, And once Janet Yellen finds out about that, she's like, whoa, we can't have that. So she reimposes the sanctions in March of 2021. So they immediately go right back in. So then fast forward then all the way to last week, you have this story from Bloomberg, May 16th, 2024. Biden administration open to easing sanctions on billionaire Dan Gertler in return for Congo exit. So 4 days, 3 days before this coup attempt occurs, this guy has his sanctions, or at least the Biden administration is reporting that they're gonna lift the sanctions. The reason they want to lift the sanctions is because they want access to the rare earth minerals in the Congo, the cobalt, the copper, that are critical for electric vehicle batteries. And so Trump had waived sanctions only to have Biden reimpose them, but I just explained what really happened there. So here you have the New York Post article. Here's Christian Malonga. Christian Malonga is the guy who led the coup. People probably heard about him. He's a Congolese citizen, so he's from the Congo. He then comes to America, becomes a naturalized citizen. He's selling cars in Utah, but he has some really nefarious connections with like the intelligence community, with these NGOs. Here's his 21-year-old son, who goes with him to the DRC. People probably remember seeing his son. Here's his son right here. So Christian Malonga, the father, is killed during this coup attempt, but his son is kidnapped or is captured, rather, arrested along with the other operators that are there. Here's a video that's been posted all over X from, we don't know exactly when this video is from, but it's a video of Malonga in the West Bank hanging out with the IDF. So he obviously has like connections to the Israeli government, to Mossad, to the IDF. So he's connected to Gertler, he's connected to Mossad, he's connected to Cohen, he's connected to Congo, he's connected to the CIA, and now he's the one leading the coup, the failed coup against the DRC. And what's behind it all? Well, rare earth minerals, the mining rights in the Congo, which involve slave labor, child labor, etc. Just wanted to point all that out. We didn't get into it last week because I hadn't dug on it yet, but man, that is a fascinating, rabbit hole. And then here's Ron Dermer. So Ron Dermer now is he's the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. He's part of the security cabinet. He's still very, very close with Netanyahu. Here he is doing an interview on Sky News recently, talking about the false narratives and all the stuff being imposed on
the Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.